Thanks so much for welcoming us today and for kicking us off in this, I hope, really exciting discussion. Thank you to COSIN for hosting this conversation today. And really, that's what this session is going to be about. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to talk with Chantel today about their journey and her own journey in interoperability for her school district and also herself as a tech director. Chantel, welcome. Can you start us off by telling us a little bit about your own education journey and how you ended up as tech director in Steuben County?
I am a lifelong educator, so I had my first classroom teaching French in a nearby town, and I taught French for 6 years. You can see my periscape in my office, and it's near and dear to my heart. I transferred school districts, brought with me some technology training that I had received at my previous district, and really technology is what allowed me to make education work, to meet the needs of my students. And I went to teaching English full-time in my new district, worked on an administrator's license, and one day my superintendent came in and said, "Hey, we have technology administrators, Chantel. I think that you'd be great at the job. If you're willing to leave your classroom, I know it's mid-year, come on down and see what this is about." So I took on the role of technology director, and a lot of people think, well, technology director, French teacher, those are two really widely different things that you've done in your life. But I tell them when they ask me or question that, I tell them that I really don't see them as different at all. If you're a language teacher, your job is to put words and phrases and sentences together and use the right tense of verbs to make communication happen. And interoperability has become a passion of mine because I see that as me interpreting the different languages to facilitate that teaching and learning, to make one coherent message and one coherent communication across all of our systems.
Chantal, you've referred to working on interoperability as cross communication or talking to having systems talk to each other. Tell us a little bit about how you started on getting those first couple systems to speak each other's language.
Interoperability is a journey. The journey for me started as a classroom teacher myself and being an early adopter of technology. There was this kind of Wild West period where you'd go to a conference and here's 3 new tools you want to use in your classroom tomorrow. Sure thing, I'll get all of my students signed up. And as a secondary teacher, for me, that meant between 150 and 180 students that I was rostering myself for most of these tools. So that's a huge burden on me. And then on top of that, we have my students now can't continue their education without this long list of usernames and passwords. So becoming technology director, my job is to make sure that I am meeting the needs and facilitating that teaching and learning, as I've said. So I want to solve those problems. To me, interoperability is this huge issue and huge problem. So I sat down and I really see this as a 3-phase journey for us. Our first phase of our journey, we implemented about 2 years ago. We implemented a single sign-on and rostering solution along with an identity management solution. So that was my first phase of the journey. My second phase of the journey, we just started this year. And to me, that is taking all of that data that we're gathering and making it all in one spot and meaningful for my users. So we are in the middle of setting up our EdFi implementation. We've got our operational data store standing up and data flowing in there, and we're working on visualizations of that data that can make an impact for administrators, for guidance counselors, for teachers, and to really lead our district in meeting students' needs. Our first visualization that we're working towards is an early warning indicator system, so that we can see if we have students who are at risk, where are they at risk? Is it behavior? Is it attendance? Is it grades? What intervention could make the most difference and the most impact on that particular student? Our third phase of the implementation of our journey is actually going to begin this summer. We're going to work on a single sign-on portal for our parents. So our parents can have that single sign-on experience through our identity management since we are housing all of that parent data in our student information system attached to the students, it is an easy way for us to give access to the different applications that we ask them to log into, to manage lunch accounts, the parent portal of our student information system. And then my long-term goal, like I see as the fourth phase of the journey, is to really implement a true LMS. We're using Google Classroom. We have been for years, but there are interoperability pieces there where our teachers are still having to log into all those various portals with different passwords in order to build their lessons. So I would like to simplify that problem for them, bring them one spot where they can see all resources available and build the lessons that they deliver out to their students.
So I love a couple things you said there, and I just want to tease a couple threads for our audience. One, that you really see this work as a multi-year journey, and that you started on something and with an external partner to really manage your first step in that journey. And I think that that is oftentimes how districts and schools get started, right? Is they start with single sign-on. And at Project Unicorn, we think that's a great place to start because it really does deliver immediate long-term effect. The other thing I want to tease out for our audience that you said, which is really important, is this idea of building the infrastructure, which at Project Unicorn, we call the pipes. And then also building out the visualizations, which at Project Unicorn, we call the hot showers. And so how do you build the things that are necessary in order to deliver real-time value to students, to parents, and to teachers? And I think that's a really important thing to be thinking about as you embark on this work. And then finally, as a mom who has that terrible one-sheet page on her fridge right now with all of my son's passwords, logins, I really appreciate the attentiveness to thinking about interoperability serving a wide range of audiences: administrators, students, teachers, and ultimately parents and families, which right now for many of us are the infantry of what's happening in COVID, that we're relying on our parents and our family engagement in a way I think that many schools and districts have never imagined before. So thanks for sharing those great lessons. What did interoperability implementation change in your district? And how did folks react to having a single sign-on or to the work you're doing right now in setting up that operational data store?
Well, I think phase one there with the single sign-on, the rostering, my administrators, guidance counselors, even district administrators, building administrators, they kind of met it with a little bit of skepticism, like, Chantel, you're going to spend a lot of money on this solution. Do we really need it? Aren't we doing okay now? Aren't we doing just fine getting kids into these systems? And teachers, on the other hand, were like, wait, you're telling me that my kids can click a button and they can get access to all their resources, that if they're at home and they're trying to continue their learning, whether it's homework or we've done virtual learning for inclement weather for several years, or now with the COVID virtual learning, you're telling me that their education doesn't stop because they've lost the list of usernames and passwords, or maybe they've written one down wrong, or the paper's gotten wet because it's not laminated. Absolutely, they were all on board for that. So my teachers were very excited to hear the news about a single sign-on and rostering solution, and then showing that to them in action, especially my primary teachers, trying to get our smallest learners to log in with usernames and passwords. Now we have a QR code and buttons to click that they can describe in shapes and colors to our smallest learners. That's made a huge impact. And so I went to teachers and I pitched this solution. They were super excited. And it's changed the way that teachers, they don't feel limited by the number of tools that they can use as long as we put them within the portal. And then I've kind of built up this little army of people who are also interested in interoperability. And as we investigate new resources, they'll say, does this fit in the portal? If it doesn't fit in the portal, we don't want it. We don't want to take that burden back on ourselves. So that's really saying to the vendors out there, it's not just the technology director, it's
Mhm.
your teachers and your students who are using these products, who really are demanding that interoperability exist, because the time for teaching and learning is so important. We can't waste
Mhm.
it trying to get students into programs.
And you certainly understood that from being a teacher yourself. And I think you said you were rostering something like 150 to 180 kids per tool. That's an enormous amount of time. And then when you extrapolate that out, just the cost savings in terms of teacher time and resources is amazing. Did interoperability prepare you for COVID-19? And what about interoperability do you think makes it essential for any school district for crisis preparedness or otherwise?
Well, Erin, we had been, as I previously told you, we have been using virtual learning days for inclement weather for a number of years here at my school district. And when we first began that, and I was first the technology director and my own son was a kindergartner, we had that big sheet of paper that came home with all the usernames and passwords.
Yeah.
And it was essential for him to complete his tasks. And even as the technology director, if a teacher is rostering a tool in his or her own classroom, I don't necessarily have access to the username and password that teacher has used. So there were some little snafus that happened for my own child learning. And teachers did see, they were hesitant to use more than one or two tools on those days and really emulate the way a school day really works with the multiple tools available to them. And that started changing as we went into interoperability. And the identity management piece here also is so important, because if a new student comes to our school district and we're in the middle of a pandemic, no one's in the office. So without the identity management piece of our interoperability system, we might not know for several days that student is here and new in our district. The person might not remember to send an email to the technology department. The person at the technology department may not receive the email or may not see the email for a couple of days. That student sitting at home, registered for classes with no materials, no curriculum in front of them, and no access to their education. So with the identity management piece of that solution, we're automatically having those accounts created. The student can automatically log in. They're automatically rostered to all those tools within 24 hours. Everything is set up and they're good to go in our system. So the students coming and going in the pandemic, when we're not in the buildings, their needs were able to be met with the identity management solution. And then they knew to click on those different buttons to access the different tools available to them. And teachers can build that into their lessons they're delivering in our district via Google Slides and Google Classroom. They click over to the other screen, the portal with their tools. Their education continues anytime, any place, without that sheet of paper. So really that'll be our new normal. Hopefully the vaccines are more widely available. Hopefully everyone, for the most part, is back to our school buildings next year. But that doesn't mean that we might not have a blizzard. We live in Indiana. We might be out of school for 10 full school days.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid, we might have a natural disaster. There may be another surge of this. If we need more vaccines, there might be another, hopefully not, but we're prepared now, no matter what, that if students come to us, we're able to give them access to their education and all the tools that they need to succeed, and assign them a device. They're on their way that same day service.
I just really admire the work that you're doing to make sure that you're meeting the needs of all of your students. It's incredible. And I think the attentiveness that you've paid to making sure that a student isn't sitting at home, right? Not having access to curriculum, not having access to really being able to connect. In that way, schools can continue to be the social safety net that they've been for our families and our communities, even when we might not be in those physical school buildings. As you think ahead to the next school year, how can interoperability prepare us to meet those needs and to meet, I think, a set of needs that are going to be different
Interoperability is essential for us to get a clear picture of where our students have been and where they're headed, where they are right now. Our interoperability part of our visualization, our hot shower solution, will be a historical look at student assessment scores, whether that's NWEA scores or state testing scores. Right now, our teachers get a new crop of students every year, and they spend those first few weeks of school really trying to diagnose where their students are in different areas. And if they have access to that previous data to all their students, they can have a very clear picture of where the student has been on the journey and more clearly help them in a more timely manner once they enter their classroom. There's not all that diagnosing again and again. When I talk to my school board about data interoperability, sometimes their eyes glaze over, but I really try hard to make it relevant to them. So I try to get them to think about when you go to your family doctor, you expect interoperability with your medical records. You don't expect going to a new specialist that they would have to run a whole diagnostic battery of tests on you once again. You think that they can see all of the previous medical history that you have, and that data is going to be correct and accurate as it's passed from person to person. We shouldn't expect less for our students and our teachers and our school buildings, because our families are depending on us to best meet their needs and help them learn and grow.
You know, one of my favorite learning scientists has this expression, and he talks about learning being jagged for all folks, that the way we learn is very jagged. It's not linear. And one thing that I think is going to be really important as we go into the next school year, I agree with you, is that ability to understand where students are at, potentially where the gaps are, or where they've made gains potentially. And how, as teachers, we can personalize and tailor our interventions to really meet students where they are. I really appreciate your advocacy, your hard work in undertaking this multi-year project. And I'm really excited for us now to turn to audience questions and hear from you and from me about potentially some of the resources that they might access and utilize in order to either begin their journey in interoperability with Project Unicorn or continue that journey into the long term. Thanks so much. Let's turn to questions now.